how much can you safely withdraw from your retirement account? Do you know? If you've done any reading on the subject, you've probably heard of the 4% rule. This states that you can withdraw up to 4% of your total balance each year. So regardless of whether the markets go up or down, you will have a reasonably constant source of income going forward. Now, the 4% rule has been around seemingly forever. It seems like it's kind of a fundamental law of nature. It came down from the heavens. It was engraved in the Sistine Chapel. But as it turns out, someone thought this up, and it's an idea that caught on. So in this video, I want to talk about where the 4% rule came from and whether it even still applies. But first, hi, I'm Mike Pumphrey from Empathic Finance, helping you move from money anxiety to financial empowerment. Let's say that you have $1 million in your various retirement accounts. The 4% rule says that you can withdraw up to 4%, or in this case, $40,000, from your accounts each year. And so if the market goes up by 4% in that year, you've broken even. If the market happens to go down and you lose some of your principal, you're still likely to be okay. The US stock market, for example, returns an average annual rate of about 7%. Maybe 8%. That guy who talks about 12%, don't listen to him. So if the stock market returns 7%, why isn't the safe withdrawal rate also 7%? The reason why it won't work is math. Here's what I mean. A common misconception is to think that if you lose a certain percentage in a given year and then gain that same percentage the next year, that you've broken even. But that's not true. If you lose 10% and then gain 10%, you're not at 100%. The more you lose, the more you have to make up in order to break even. So what that means is that even if the stock market returns 7% on average each year, you need to withdraw less than that amount to ensure that you either break even or end up ahead. So what is that amount? What is the maximum amount of money you can withdraw in order to make sure that you never run out of money? Enter this guy. This is Bill Bengen, a financial planner out of California, or at least he was, who in the 1980s asked this same question. And he published an article about his findings in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994. So he looked at all of the stock market returns going back to 1926, and then looked at what would the various returns be based on different hypothetical withdrawal scenarios. So, going all the way back to 1926, and using a hypothetical 50% mix of stocks and treasury bonds, he plugged in various percentages to see what happened. He started with 3%. And as this chart shows, in every case, the portfolio would last at least 50 years. He kind of stopped counting after that. He then moved on to 4%. And as you can see here, depending on when you retired and started taking distributions, your money might last different amounts. As you can see, in 1936, your portfolio would last under 40 years, and in 1966, we're looking at 30-something. So why did this happen? Well, in the 30s, there was this thing called the Great Depression, and in the 60s and 70s, there was this thing called stagflation, low returns mixed with very high inflation, which depreciates the value of your portfolio. But 4% was reasonably safe. In no case between 1926 and 1976 did the portfolio last less than 3 decades. Then he moved on to 5%, and he found that in many cases, a portfolio would be totally exhausted in as little as 2 decades. Not nearly enough for a long and healthy retirement. And at 6%, forget it. There's, no way. And so, the quote that would become much more well-known than he is as follows. Therefore, I counsel my clients to withdraw at no more than a 4% rate during the early years of retirement, especially if they retire early, age 60 or younger. And the 4% rule was born. Now, you could probably see that there's a lot more nuance to this rule than meets the eye. Remember that he is accounting for past performance, which, as we all know, is no guarantee of future results. But it's kind of all we have. The point is that going back to 1926, we've had some pretty bad financial times. So this analysis is basically saying, well, if we have really bad times again that kind of look like it did before, would we be okay? These are worst case scenarios. Even in the 6% hypothetical, there were times when the portfolio would last 50 years or more. It all comes down to when you retire and when you start taking distributions and what happens to the market during that time. Also, your early years of retirement matter much more than your later years of retirement. Remember what I said before about if you lose a bunch of money, then you have to make up even more to get back to where you started from. That's a bigger deal if it happens right when you retire. Incidentally, he was never trying to ensure that money lasted forever. He just wanted to make sure that it lasted at least 3 decades, which is about the length of a maximum retirement back in the 90s. Don't tell Bill Bengen about the FIRE movement. Also, this was assuming a 50% ratio of stocks and treasury bonds. If you change that ratio up, you're going to get different results. So what does Bill think today? Having lived with this 4% rule for 25 or so years, what does he think now? Well, it turns out that even he thinks the 4% rule is too conservative. In a recent interview with Marketplace, he said, historically, it was just the worst case scenario. It was based on someone who retired at the worst moment he could find in modern times. Someone retiring then would still have been okay for 30 years if they withdrew no more than 4%. At other points in history, when inflation was low and stocks and bonds were cheap, a new retiree could have withdrawn much more and done okay. The average safe withdrawal rate has turned out to be about 7%, and at points it has reached as high as 13%. Of course, retirees who are that fortunate wouldn't have known that until afterwards. Hey, 7%! Are we back here after all? Alas, Bill's not saying that at all. But he did update his model. It's been 25 years after all. And he found that the worst case scenario isn't 4%, it's 4.5%. Oh, Bill, how you tease. But he actually said that he himself uses a 5% withdrawal rate. If it's good enough for Bill, it's probably good enough for us. But the truth is that the amount you can safely withdraw each year from your retirement portfolio depends on a lot of factors, not just this simplistic 4% rule or 5% rule, whatever it is now. For most people, I think the biggest challenge isn't what percentage to withdraw, it's how do you get as much money in there in the first place? I mean, 4% of $1 million is great, but 4% of $2 million? Much better. But, like all good rules of thumb, it's a starting point, a place to begin the conversation of how you're going to afford your life as you move into retirement. Are you going for 7 or even 10%? Do you believe that 12% guy? I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Let me know how I can help. I want you to have the information you need so that you can navigate your financial life with empowerment. If you like what I'm doing, click like, click subscribe, get notified when I release new videos. And as always, thanks for watching.